What is up? You're listening to a Monday morning edition of the Splash Ag podcast, though it's being recorded on Sunday night right after Lakers Nuggets, no, the game two of the Western Conference Finals. I'll talk about that in a moment. A lot's happened since the last episode, so I just wanted to have a couple quick hits, both with regards to basketball and as well as a couple other just miscellaneous topics. Most notably, the trailer for WandaVision came out, and so I'll talk about that in a little bit. But first, I want to start with Game 7 of the Nuggets and the Clippers series. Now, I recorded a podcast before Game 7 with Andrew, my buddy Andrew, and we had both kind of thought, the Clippers. Well, Game 7's usually the pace slows down. It's more of a rock fight. Guys are a little tense. The better, whichever team has better defense and can just get enough shots to go, usually ends up winning in Game 7s traditionally. So we think, okay, by all those metrics, the Clippers should win because they have Kawhi Leonard, who obviously one of the best, probably if not the best two-way player in the NBA. And he's a guy that, though obviously he doesn't have quite the offensive arsenal of like a Kevin Durant, but at the end of the day, you feel like he can go get you a bucket in whatever shape or form when it really comes down to it. And I'm gonna be honest, I honestly think it's really disgraceful what happened to the Clippers because this is the biggest game of their season. They're one of the title favorites. And it wasn't like they were down a lot heading into the fourth quarter. Like, it was still a very winnable game in the fourth quarter. And for Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, the two all-stars, the two quote-unquote superstars, and we could talk about that in a moment, but for them to go for 0 points and then just absolutely quit with like 7-8 minutes to go, it's really head-scratching, quite honestly. Like, in the past, you can consider the 3-1 deficit as part of it, sure. But in the past, when teams have come down from 3-1, you can kind of look in and understand like what exactly happened, right? And in a lot of those times, even when the team loses in Game 7, it's not like they roll over in the fourth quarter of a close Game 7 and then absolutely just get stomped. Like, it is actually head scratching. It makes, obviously a lot of people were wondering, like, is the Clipper curse a real thing? Like, I was debating like what was more disappointing, this or the 2015 series against the Rockets. Now the Rockets series had the more singular weird moment, which was the second half of Game 6 at Staples Center when Josh Smith was taking step back threes and making it rain along with Jason Terry, Terrence Jones, a little bit of Corey Brewer and Trevor Ariza, and James Harden was sitting on the bench. That was probably a weirder game per se, but when it comes to the more disappointing overall kind of series, I'd probably go with this one because this is when the Clippers they're a win away from playing in the conference finals against the Lakers, and they've always, been the little brother, the little brother team in LA, and it was just a huge opportunity for that franchise, and they absolutely fumbled it. And Steve Ballmer was heated, and if I were him, I would have been heated too. And it was just really, really strange. But kind of now seeing reports from whether it's Chris Haynes or Mark Spears and other kind of discussion of their chemistry, it's not all that surprising. Not to say, don't get me wrong, I expected them to win that Game 7. Quite frankly, I expected them to close out that series before it even got to a Game 7. But when you think about it, Kawhi, as great as he is, he's never been like the emotional heart and soul of a team, right? Like, I know this has probably been hashed out through many programs, but he's just kind of a motionless cyborg Kawhi, and he's freaking amazing at what he does, right? I'm not trying to crap on Kawhi just because he had a bad game, but when that's the case, I've never gotten, when I watch Kawhi, I've never gotten the sense watching from him that he's the guy that's like, he's like firing up and rallying the troops, and he's like, yo, guys, we need to effing go. Like, come on, let's fucking do this, Like, I never get that sense from Kawhi. If there's anyone on the Clippers that's like that, it's Patrick Beverley, and obviously he's not their best player, and he's not even one of their three best players. So it's just, I guess I'll put it this way. A lot of times you take the personality of your best players, and who are the Clippers' best players? You got emotionless Kawhi and Paul George, who is chirping a lot, but not exactly showing up. And apparently, according to that Chris Haynes report, this whole year he's essentially deflected any accountability or responsibility and has had no sense of accountability. Where in the report, essentially, he yelled at Harrell, and Harrell essentially rolled his eyes and said, "Yep, it's never your fault," in a very kind of sarcastic tone. So, with all that in mind, like, doesn't and given how the Clippers never seemed to be like truly dominant, like they were always like good in the regular season, but they never had that one stretch where everyone was playing together and everyone was kind of in sync. I can look back and say, okay, like we should have seen roots for this combustion, but to just absolutely kind of choke on yourself. I don't like using the word choke, but to absolutely just kind of like shoot yourself in the foot like that, and to just give up and be like, okay, we're going home when there's still time left and what have you. It's very disappointing. I don't even like the Clippers. I wasn't even I was definitely happy that Denver won, but it's just like as a basketball fan, you look at that and you're like, wow, like that's pathetic, quite honestly. So those are my thoughts on Clippers. Those are my thoughts on Clippers and Nuggets Game 7. I was definitely happy to see the Heat take a commanding 2-0 lead, although they lost Game 3 with the return of Gordon Hayward. As I'm watching the Heat Celtics series, I can't help but somewhat take a victory lap with regards to Tyler Hero, and here's why. He hasn't shot the ball particularly well, with the exception of a couple quarters. So whether it was first quarter of Game 1, I believe, or Game 2, I forget which one, as well as the second quarter of Game 3, he hasn't shot it particularly well. But what I like about him is that as a rookie, and so you can already see that he's putting in effort and making strides in areas that are considered his weaknesses, right? Most notably his defense. But honestly, I've seen him come up big when it comes to rebounding. I've seen him try a lot harder and have a little bit better awareness on defense. And I've seen him be a much better playmaker than, say, you saw about, 2 years ago at Kentucky. And that's definitely really encouraging. And every time I see that Hero to Bam connection, it's so much fun to watch. But yeah, we'll see where that series goes. I expect it to be a long, hard-fought series. I'm pulling for the Heat. I obviously said on the last podcast that I have the Heat winning in 7. So we'll see where that goes. But I am Tyler Hero. I am on the Tyler Hero. I've been on the Tyler Hero wagon since before he even played his first game at Kentucky. And even it's funny. I remember I was disappointed in his college debut against Duke, but I didn't give up. I didn't just jump off the. I didn't just lose faith. And Tyler, if Tyler, if I ever if he ever happens to listen to this, I will let him know I was on him for a while. But anyhow, moving on to Lakers Nuggets, the Western Conference game, the Western Conference Finals Game 2. So I just watched the fourth quarter of that. I'm about an hour-ish removed from that crazy exciting finish, and I have a couple takeaways. And I genuinely don't think that this is being prisoner of the moment. So let's first things first. Incredible play after the time. Incredible play, out of bounds play that the Lakers executed. The Lakers didn't have a timeout, but it was an incredible inbounds play that they executed to get AD the open three. Mason Plumlee, he messed up, but that said, you give all the credit in the world to AD. And it's ironic they're wearing the Black Mamba jerseys. I think that's really cool and whatnot. But a couple other thoughts before that was, what an exciting finish, right? Jamal Murray, right before then, he has that block. Jokic seems to come up big in every playoff game that I see him in. Like when I think back to him against the Spurs, against the Blazers, and then obviously against the Clippers, Jokic is a guy where you even just looking at the statistics, you can see like, okay, he's better in the playoffs. Like he's shooting better, he's scoring more, he's averaging more rebounds and assists. But another thing that I think you have to actually watch the games to see is that he comes up big Like when his team needs buckets or when he just makes the clutch play, it always seems like in these high leverage playoff moments. And that's something that is definitely really encouraging because you have so many superstars who are kind of the opposite, where they perform, they seem to shrink a little more in the moment. It's good to see Jokic come through, as well as Murray. He's been, I know that there's some playoff games, especially notably in the Portland series last year, where he didn't shoot it particularly well. But this year in the playoffs, he's looked like something else. That's all. This doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out, but Murray, what I'd love to see him do, and I'm sure many people say this, is I'd love to see him be a little more consistent from game to game and in the regular season. And I don't see, I mean, he has the talent, and obviously he's shown he's got the chops. I honestly, I would say I expect him to be an all-star next year, barring injury. So we'll see if this kind of carries over to next season, if we even have whenever we even have next season. We'll see. But so those are some thoughts with regards to the NBA playoffs. Incredible shot by AD, and I guess another quick note. Rondo, man. Rondo he has a knack for the moment. Kind of like what I've heard Kevin O'Connor of The Ringer say about Marcus Smart. It just feels like in big games, with the exception of maybe the Dallas, when he was in Dallas, it just always seems like Rondo comes up. He just plays better when there's a bigger spotlight. And like I said, that's not something you typically get from players. If anything, it's the opposite. But that's definitely cool to see Rondo come through like that. And I swear to God, he's just a better shooter in the playoffs. Like when in the regular season, I'll watch games, I'm like, no, don't shoot that. But then in the playoffs, he takes it. I'm like, and then it goes in. So good for Rondo. It's cool to see him be an effective, like a meaningful rotation player on a title contender. After obviously he had a couple years there where he wasn't really in title contention and so forth, but. Yeah, so that's about it with regards to my thoughts on the NBA playoffs. I'll bring in some more guests later on to chat more about that. The last thing I actually wanted to talk about was the WandaVision trailer now. Obviously, with the pandemic and everything, Marvel Studios has had to adjust, as has the entire movie industry. So originally the plan was that Marvel's Phase 4 was going to get kicked off with the Black Widow movie, which is obviously set before Infinity War and Endgame. And I thought, okay, that's an interesting choice. It is a little more of a prequel, so I guess that could be cool. I've seen, this isn't really a spoiler, it's more of a theory, but I've seen theories about how it may set up like a group of villains for Phase 5 or Phase 4, Phase 5 / the future of Marvel, but So Black Widow gets delayed. There was a little bit of hope that Falcon and the Winter Soldier might be the one to kick off Phase 4. That got delayed. Right now, we're in limbo with regards to Black Widow. We don't know if it's going to be delayed or not. And the only thing that we have confirmed is that now WandaVision is going to be the first Disney Plus series that Marvel's going to drop. And it's going to be the first one. Sorry, it's going to drop. It's officially confirmed to drop in December 2020, according to the Disney Plus landing page. So with that in mind, I'm very curious to see where they go. I'm going to be honest. I watched the trailer and I was like, I can't quite I can't quite get what the main plot or thread is going to be. I assume that because Wanda is going to be in Doctor Strange 2, which is about the multiverse. I assume that there might be some type of fake parallel reality messing with time or reality and what have you. I'm sure that that's the explanation for, hey, Vision died in Infinity War and he didn't come back in Endgame. How is he around? I'm sure that it may just be some sort of illusion or messing with reality, so to speak. But with that in mind, I'm still not quite sure. Honestly, what the plot is based on what the trailer showed, it wasn't the show that I was like most looking forward to per se. I do really like Elizabeth Olsen as an actor, but what I will say is that Marvel Studios. First off, I'm way too far in on the Marvel Studios train. the MCU train to just hop off now. And the second thing is, first off, I didn't think the trailer was bad by any means. Like, it didn't give me any reason to be discouraged. It was more so that I just wasn't really quite sure what to make of it. But the other thing is, with Marvel Studios, to me, I feel like after with their track record and their consistency, it won't be I have no reason I should always give them the benefit of the doubt, and I have no reason to not believe in them until they give me a reason to, right? So whether it's the first flop of a movie that they have or a bad TV show. And yes, I know some people are going to listen and say, what about the Netflix series? What I'll say to that is the Netflix series were helmed by Marvel Television, and they weren't being seen by Kevin Feige and the main kind of junction at Marvel Studios. And as a result, they weren't really fully integrated in the MCU umbrella. That's definitely been a complaint that I've seen people have with regards to the Marvel Netflix series. But these TV shows, they are being helmed under Kevin Feige, and the intention is that they are part of the main Marvel Cinematic Universe. And so until they give me a dud, I have no reason. I always have faith that they'll deliver. So we'll see. That this is obviously a new format for them to explore some of their storytelling. So very excited to see what happens with respect to that. I guess some other quick thoughts. I'm thinking, what else has been going on? Steve Nash got hired as the coach of the Brooklyn Nets. That happened a little while ago. I didn't really get to address that. And I know that there was, Stephen A. made some controversial comments. I think if you listen to it a little more closely, he's not actually pinning anything on Steve Nash. But with regards to how Steve Nash will actually do on the job, quite frankly, I think Steve Nash is going to thrive on the job because first off, not only is he one of the best basketball minds that the game has seen, but I think if you've listened to him on the Bill Simmons podcast or any podcast, you can tell that he's not only good at thinking the game, but he's also incredibly good at communicating concepts. And that, I think, is where some coaches some former Hall of Fame level coaches, Hall of Fame players that became coaches, where they may have fallen short. On top of that, I think Steve Nash, his personality is very much a me last, everybody else first kind of guy. And I think that definitely permeates to how he's going to kind of work with his players and collaborate with them. He seems like a guy who's got a very cool and calm demeanor and is not going to be like the guy that's, like yelling at guys and trying and being maniacal on the sidelines. He's a little more in that Steve Kerr vein with respect to his demeanor. And obviously, he's a Hall of Fame basketball player. And lastly, I think the relationships that he's cultivated certainly help. Most notably, it's been well documented, his relationship with KD from his time as a consultant for the Warriors. And with that, I think his time with the Warriors, the fact that he spent a couple of years just kind of observing how Steve Kerr, Bob Myers were kind of running that thing, I think that's certainly going to help him in Brooklyn. So I'm really excited to see Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, whoever else they may be able to bring in, as well as we'll see if they keep, Karis LeVert, Spencer Dinwiddie, Jared Allen, etc., along with Steve Nash, who is one of my favorites to watch. So, yeah, definitely excited about that. But so I'm going to wrap it up there. So if you haven't done so, I appreciate you listening. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe on whatever your medium you're listening to, whether it be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, or YouTube. Once again, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you soon.